Welcome back to the Google Ads Lead Gen Show. My name is Michelle Kopp from Level 28 Media.
And my name is Dean Hua with Sachi Studio.
And in today's video, we have a really exciting topic that we're going to be covering, and it's what to expect when you're running Google Ads. So, Dean, you want to go ahead and kick it off? We'll go ahead and dive into many different areas on this topic. Talk about ad budget, experimentation, volatility, seasonality, and operations, as well as different metrics that we look at while we're in that setup phase as we are launching our first Google Ad campaigns.
Sure. So I guess the first question or talking point is ad budget. How much should you expect to spend on a monthly basis? Before you answer, the way I'll answer is it goes without saying, but obviously you should have a realistic expectation. And so that sounds like common sense, but for a lot of people who are new to Google Ads, they don't know what realistic looks like. So unrealistic would be if you're a personal injury attorney and your monthly budget is $2,000. That's unrealistic because if you know anything about PI, it's about $100 cost per click on the higher end. On the lower end, it could be $50. So for something like personal injury, probably you're looking at 5 to 10K monthly budget. So the way you can kind of figure out what your monthly budget should be is maybe look up the cost per click for that industry. And generally, a lot of agencies, especially mine, will look up the CPC if we've never competed in that industry before. So if you're an acupuncturist coming to me and I've never dealt with acupuncture before, I'll probably go look up the CPC for that industry and then try to extrapolate what the monthly budget should look like. So number one, you should have a realistic expectation of your monthly budget. What do you think?
Yeah, so what I typically do is I will research in that geography. So wherever we're targeting, wherever the client wants to target, I put a set of sample keywords in there, set the geography in the Google Keyword Planner, and do research on the average cost per click. From there, I'll back out exactly how much the ad budget should be. The ad budget too will also depend on what your lead goals are. But a lot of times clients don't know what their lead goals are. They just say, I want leads. Okay, well, so then they turn to us to then give them a realistic starting budget so that at least we can start seeing traction. So based off of the average cost per click, then I will just do like some forecasting based off of, 10 to 20 clicks a day, how many days a week you want to be live, and then do the back of the napkin math on that to then determine what the average cost per click should be. And also taking into account if your click-through rate is a certain percentage, if your conversion rate is a certain percentage, this is how many leads you could potentially expect. But in the forecasting part of it, I always caveat that it's a forecast. It's not a guarantee. So we don't really know, and we won't know until we actually start running this. So this is the scenario that I typically go through as I plan for campaigns that don't already have an existing like historical data. Now, if there is historical data and a client has been running Google Ads in the past and it's been set up properly, then we can use that information to help even give us a better idea of what we could potentially forecast. Any more thoughts on that?
No, I think you hit on some really good points.
Okay, sounds good. Okay, so the next talking point that we have here is experimentation. How do you determine an ideal cost per lead for a client?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I always tell every new client I bring on board that my goal, my objective is to knock it out of the ballpark within the first month. That's my objective. Obviously, it does not always work that way. It may take 1 month, 2 months, or 3 months. Usually no more than that unless it's a very long sales cycle industry that we're competing in. But in order to determine CPL, I'll just piggyback off what you said 2 minutes ago, which is I'll do some, paper napkin math. Take a look at the CPC. Take a look. I'll do some estimates on your close rate, and then I'll factor in conversion rates. So those three factors, along with budget, will help me determine CPL. But like you also said, sometimes we underperform or we overperform relative to our own forecasting. Um, so that's what I have in my head. Usually, it takes 1 or 2 months to see, especially in the B2C niche. It takes 1 or 2 months to kind of get a rough idea of what CPL could look like. And then once I've determined what the CPL looks like after the first couple months, I then try to figure out how much more room we have to grow. Like, should I switch over from manual bidding to a smart bidding strategy? If so, what are my chances of driving down the CPL for that? Right. So, in essence, if I had to summarize all of this, run the campaign for the first couple months and let the data show before you can start, making incremental improvements to your CPL metric.
Yeah. And just like what we discussed in previous episodes, we talked about how there's no real guarantee. We can only really do some forecasting on the cost per lead and then let the data speak to us based off of what the data is saying. Then we can continue to optimize. But we also have to set realistic expectation with clients too, saying that, hey, there's only so low of a cost per lead that you can go to. You're never going to get it down to zero. It's impossible because you're never going to be able to convert. You're never going to be able to convert on every single click. That's just impossible, right? And then on top of that, in terms of the search demand and the seasonality, which we will be talking about as well in this episode, that has a huge factor that plays into it. So that's something that I wanted to add to what you said.
Okay. Um, what's your thoughts on having technical expertise? Does technical integrations play a role in Google Ads? If so, like along what lines? Like, to give you an example, to give you more context, I think a lot of people who get into Google advertising, regardless if it's someone just starting out as a media buyer for an agency or a business owner trying to do it himself, I think they underestimate how important it is to have technical expertise. For example, setting up your conversions, setting up your integrations, not just with your CRM, with your landing page, with Google Analytics, or with your call tracking. I think that's very bewildering for a lot of people who are trying to do Google Ads, and I don't think they correctly estimate how much time it takes to handle that part before they even get to the actual campaign management.
Mm-hmm.
So my question to you is, like, do you think people underestimate or overestimate how much time it takes to do technical integrations?
I think a lot of clients tend to underestimate. They think it's something that you can just turn on and, start tomorrow. Yeah, I think a lot of clients, they tend to underestimate what goes into it. They just think, and I think with like smart campaigns, Performance Max, and all the new shiny objects that have been coming out, Google wants you to think it's that easy to set things up, set it and forget it, right? And just put a budget, like even with local service ads too, set it up and then you don't ever have to check it again. And all of a sudden it's going to be raining leads. So I think that a lot of these newer to campaign types are creating this fallacy when it comes to making clients think that it's that easy to set things up. And I think some clients, they're weighing like, oh, should I just do a smart campaign because it's just easy? All I have to do is just put a couple keyword themes, put my website and set a budget, or do I need to hire a professional? And why do I need to do standard search ads? And I think, bringing this topic up, like, what are your thoughts between that? Because they're two different routes that you can take, right? In terms of generating leads. One is like, oh, set it and forget it with the, fast and easy way. Or why would you then go and hire a professional to do it the long way or the more complicated way? So how would you go about answering that?
Yeah, so you have to remember, with most of these paid ads platforms, regardless if it's Facebook, TikTok, LinkedIn, or Google, their job is to have you thinking that it's really easy to do and that it truly is set it and forget it. Because if you do set it and forget it, they actually make more money because they know that you're not gonna be on top of things. And someone who's not on top of things is probably you're wasting a lot of money, and that's just money that goes back to Google. So definitely don't set it and forget it.
Okay. Perfectly fine with that. So let's go ahead and talk about some expectations. How do you go about setting expectations? What would you expect when running Google Ads? What do you typically tell clients when on launch day, when the campaign goes live?
Yeah, so it's a two-step process with me. Number one, this the first step is really when I vet them and I ask them what their budget is. And I want to see if their budget is realistic with what I'm looking at as well. Okay. If I feel like their budget isn't realistic, I'll correct them and let them know what they should consider as a realistic budget. And if they still come on board, that's great. Now we're in line with that. In terms of launching, I tell every single one of my clients that the day we launch, we're gonna go silent for like a week because we simply just want to collect data on what's going on. So we're still here, we're still working on your account, but you're not going to hear from us for at least a week, which actually isn't that bad because there's a lot of agencies, once they launch, you don't hear from them until like the end of the month, if at all, right? So after the first week, once we've done collecting data, we can then report back to them and say, hey, this is what we're seeing in terms of CPC. If we got any conversions, if we're seeing any sort of weird stuff or normal stuff, and then we continue on with client agency communications from that point forward. Usually, for me, I feel that the first 2 months is the rockiest when it comes to the client agency relationship. So I always go out of my way, at least within the first month, to have 3 or 4 touch points with the client. Okay, even if we're not necessarily doing the greatest in the first month, I think it gives them some level of comfort knowing that we're at least there and we're at least
And you
acknowledging
care.
them. Yeah, that we care.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. Well, I think yeah, at the end of the day, clients just want to know that you care because like I'm sure a lot of clients have worked with other agencies that you're right, like they don't hear from their agency until the very end of the month, and it's just a monthly report that they don't understand what the heck is happening. So it is critical to have those touch points to show that we are being proactive in terms of getting things done, in terms of moving the needle forward, and getting the best possible results. And you're right, it doesn't always just come in the first month, sometimes 2, 3 months. And that's a really hard pill to swallow. But, that's that's also part of testing and learning, especially if it's a niche that you haven't actually, worked in, or it's a niche that's a little bit trickier to really nail down.
yeah.
Yeah.
Um, moving along, I also want to add on that I think feedback is really important. I know I talked about this a couple episodes ago, but we as marketers and agencies, we don't operate in a vacuum, meaning you don't just sit there and give us money. We launch a campaign and then, leads are raining down from heaven. It doesn't really work that way. Conversions start happening, but this is where the real work begins. For me, once conversion starts coming in, what's going on your end? Like, what are you seeing? So, for example, if we measure a conversion as a phone call, and all of a sudden you're starting to get phone calls, what's the quality of these phone calls? Are they only 30 seconds or 3 minutes? If they're only 30 seconds, what's happening, right? So, for example, I have a doctor client that we launched 2 months ago, and I was asking for feedback after the first month, and they actually gave me really good feedback. They said, "Hey, Dean, we actually started getting more calls than usual for Medicaid." Right? So I was like, "Oh, that's not good," because they're cash based, so they don't really
Okay.
work with Medicaid. So I
Okay.
said, "Hey, that's great feedback. Now I can go back on my end and figure out what I can do." So should I, for example, maybe block out like the lower 50%, lower 50 percentile in terms of income, right? Maybe
Mm-hmm.
should I add Medicaid or Medicare as a negative keyword, Maybe I should pre-qualify a little bit harder on the landing page. So I could do all of these things, but I can't necessarily do them if I don't get good feedback.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, what I tell clients is it's a joint accountabilities model, the way that we work together. I can do my job, but then at the end of the day, if you're not doing your job and I'm not getting the feedback, then it's all going to be disjointed and we're not going to be able to get the best possible results. So there has to be an understanding that the lead generation marketer, pay-per-click marketer, or the agency, whoever's managing it, is not responsible for the full funnel and actually closing all the leads. But they should also care about your return on investment. But you need to understand that the marketer is not fully responsible for the entire funnel. They're only responsible for bringing people in and then getting people qualified. And then from there, it's, for your responsibility to follow up with the leads and then give the feedback to the person that you've hired to manage your Google Ads campaign.
Yeah, fair. So moving along, um, how do you communicate to clients that not all prospects are going to turn into actual clients? Like,
Yeah.
what's your train of thought on that?
Part of that is it seems like it should be obvious, but at the same time, it's not. I just tell clients not all leads are gold. Some are going to flake, especially when it comes to paid advertising. A lot of them can be kind of flaky. So it's a matter of having the right processes in place, especially because if they found you online, they have no loyalty to you. Maybe they haven't even done any research or on your reviews if you have a Google My Business or Yelp profile. So they're going to probably be a little bit flaky, but we just have to expect that that's part of the type of lead quality that we're going to be getting. Not all of them are going to turn into actual paid clients. We just have to expect that, some people, they need to, especially if you're selling high ticket products. I need to talk to my husband. I need to talk to my wife. I need to get approval from my boss on this. So a lot of times it's going to require some follow up. Actually, many times will require a lot of follow up. So I think that that's just one of the things that we have to that I make sure that I have to communicate is that not all leads are gold, and that all of it is a lot of it's going to require a decent amount of follow up on your end. How about you?
Yeah, I think something I tell a lot of clients today when it comes to how paid search works in 2023, part of the reason why a lot of prospects don't convert is that I can guarantee you, especially if you're a service-based business, if they're talking to you, they're probably talking to two other
They're
businesses as
shopping.
well. They're
Yeah.
shopping around. This is very prevalent with local-based businesses, whether you're a home contractor, you're a chiropractor, you're a lawyer. I guarantee you they're shopping around. Why? Because you would do the same thing. That's what smart shoppers do. I'm one of those people when it comes to Amazon. Um, I shop around a lot. Like if I'm looking for a printer on Amazon, I'm looking at the reviews. I'm comparing it against like maybe 9 other
You're
products
watching
as well,
videos. Yeah.
watching videos. I mean, but that's just how I am. But I do think a lot of people are like that, especially when it comes to service-based business, because a lot of service-based businesses, they charge several $1,000s or more depending on the service, right?
Yeah.
So of course people are going to shop around.
Yeah.
So it's important to have a realistic expectation of that, and it's important for the agency to not measure success on conversions. Like if it's costing me $50 for a conversion being a phone call, it's important that I also take a step back and understand that, well, what's it really costing my client for an actual new customer,
Customer.
right?
Hmm.
Does it take 4 conversions at $50 each to turn them into an actual client? And if so, is that profitable enough for the client? And if it's not, what can I do to drive costs down?
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah. And then also, when you do that exercise, it also allows your client to see where there's potentially holes in their closing process too. because you generate leads, but then the next phase is actually getting them to the close. But what's happening from that generating leads to the close? A lot of people tend to fall off the bandwagon at that point. Is it because you're not following up fast enough? Is it because something's wrong with your customer service? I think that there's a lot that goes into it. In regards to uncovering where in the funnel people you're losing people, because you will be losing people at every stage, from the moment that you get them to click on your ad, to then converting into a lead, to then converting into an actual qualified lead that should then convert into an actual close.
Yep, I agree. Let's move on. Um, where does volatility play a role in all of this, if at all? And what types of volatility should people expect?
Yeah, I think something that we talked about in one of our previous episodes is that when it comes to pay per click, Google Ads, any type of paid advertising in general, we have to expect that it operates almost like the stock market. In general, there's going to be some days where you might get no leads, and that's okay. But instead of looking at it on a day by day basis, once you collect enough data, then you'll have more, and over a longer period of time, then you'll have enough data to then go back and look at month over month, week over week, eventually year over year, if you're in this for the long haul, to then make better decisions about your campaign, because there is going to be seasonality depending on the type of industry. So, some right now it's summertime. It's tends to be really slow for B2B. So I do have to let some of my B2B clients know that, hey, this is normal. A lot of decision makers right now are traveling. They're not in the mindset of actually signing up for executive coaching services or workplace interior design services. A lot of that tends to pick up more like when the school year starts, or when the new quarter starts, or when the quarter is about to end, because maybe they'll have more budget to be, playing with, that they can invest in stuff like this. So I think that that's something that we have to consider. Any thoughts on that?
No, I don't think I have anything else to add to that, but I do just want to say real quickly that when you're in the paid ads lead generation business, there are months when the lead generation guys just say, you know what, there's no way you're gonna get leads this
I
this
think
month.
this month is one of those.
Yeah,
Would you agree?
yeah, like it's just like you said, seasonality and cyclicality, but also just complete randomness. You have to account for randomness as well, and that's not something a lot of clients want to hear, but it's
Mhm.
true. Like over the course of a 1 year campaign, there's a lot of randomness that just occurs out of nowhere. So that's just something I want to get in there. That's all.
Right. And then sometimes clients get spoiled too, because like you're killing it with results one week, and then all of a sudden it like dries up or it gets quiet the next, and then they're like, "Hey, what happened?" So
Yeah. Oh, also, I do want to add in terms of volatility. I just one quick story from another doctor client of mine. We were running max conversions really well. So we were running max conversions really well, where we getting, I think it was at $55 cost per conversion, right? But then what had happened was there was a 1 week period where her campaign got turned off because her credit card number expired. And
yeah.
so we weren't aware of that. And so when I finally caught on to it, I said, hey, listen, you need to find a new credit card. And she fixed it pretty quickly. But what happened after the next several weeks is that max conversions started tanking because it relied on a 30-day period, and there's that 7-day
That
cycle where
wasn't
we weren't
working.
getting conversions.
Yeah.
So it took me actually a good 4 to 6 weeks to fix that.
And you wouldn't
So
have
there was a
known
lot of
that it would
volatility
have,
there.
yeah, you wouldn't have known that it was going to take that long too. So
Yeah,
that's to get things back on track. So
yeah,
that's kind of scary.
yeah.
Yeah. All right. So let's then move on to the next piece. We talked about a little bit about ops, operations affecting leads. What are your, I guess, best practices that you want to share, or that you typically share with clients, like at the launch of a campaign, when it comes to following up with leads and stuff like that?
Yeah, so I don't know if I share best practices because it's not my job to train their staff on how to, handle incoming leads. But what I try to communicate is that, hey, listen, you're paying me and you're paying Google for these incoming leads. It's really important that you're on top of things or that your front desk is on top of things. So, be prompt. Don't let it go to voice message because a lot of times once it gets to voice message, a lot of people don't even want to leave a voice message because they can't be bothered, right? And it's important that your front desk operations have good sales experience and they know how to handle objections or challenges that comes along the way. So I don't know if I have necessarily best practices, but those are things I try to communicate to them. And if any of those things falter, your cost per lead metrics goes up quite dramatically.
Yeah, I don't know if you experience this often, but maybe you might not experience it that often because you do a lot of pre-qualifying and vetting when you're talking to potential clients. But when I first got into freelancing and I was just really new to managing clients in my business many years ago, that was the number one complaint that I would get. I would kill it in terms of results that I would see on my end, and I would always get the same thing from the same response from every client. And it's, well, you're getting us leads, but they're not converting into
Hmm.
sales. They're not converting into actual paid clients. And a part of me is like, oh, well, I'm starting to get like a little bit defensive. And it's like, well, it's not my job to, well, I wouldn't say it like that, but between you and me, we both know, you mentioned it too. It's not our job to close the lead. But also realizing that if we have that attitude and if we say that to the client, then and we're not trying to be helpful, then at the end of the day, we'll end up getting axed too. so
Yeah.
so one thing that I started doing was implementing, I created a little like best practices sheet that I would share with clients. And I would take them through that in the onboarding when we'd work together, pretty much say stuff like, some of the stuff that you mentioned, make sure that you're prompt in answering the calls. If it has to go to voicemail, at least have a voicemail set up, because sometimes, some of these clients, they don't even have a voicemail set up. And yeah, some other things too, when it comes to form submissions, don't wait more than even 10-15 minutes. When you see it, call them back right away. I had one client say, is it okay if I call back in 48 hours? I was like, well, do you want the customer or not?
Yeah.
And he was a waxing and tanning client too, that offered, $50 waxes. So, when someone's looking for this type of thing, they're not going to want to wait that long.
Yeah, that's an impulse buy right there.
It is an
Yeah.
impulse buy. But the fact that he asked me, oh, is it okay to follow up within 48 hours? My response to him was, are you fine with losing the client?
Yeah. Or you can just like reverse and say, well, what if you're the prospect? How would you
Yeah,
feel? Yeah.
exactly. Yeah. So, and then he got it. He was like, yeah, I get it. I get it. So that's the thing. We just have to, for me, because I heard it so many times, I just had to put some type of thing in place. And even though I have that best practice sheet in place, I still sometimes get that response from clients. But that's just part of what we typically hear when we do lead gen anyway. So
Yeah.
it's just part of the job.
Okay.
Um, and then, yeah, the last thing that I wanted to touch on was, in terms of expectations for performance. Do you tend to tell clients that, whatever performance that we're getting this month, we cannot expect to necessarily see it in future months? How do you go about setting the expectation around that?
No, so I definitely that's a horrible way of setting myself up for failure. Um, Again, our job, ideally, our job is to always make sure things are profitable, A, and B, things are always improving. And the way I quantify improvement is basically if your cost per lead goes down and your ROI goes up. Ideally, that should be happening month to month, but that's not what really happens. A lot of times there's a lot of volatility, like you said. And the way I try to frame it within the context of a client agency relationship is hey, listen, I think we're doing really good. Like, we're doing really good, and I think there's still room for improvement. Here's what I'm going to experiment with over the next 2, 3, or 6 months, whatever the relationship is. And that's how I go about doing it. And then I keep in touch with them month to month. I think if you do it like that, you keep it simple, you'll be fine. I try not to, unless it's a very advanced client who has like a lot of data to feed me, where we can start making benchmarks or predictions on ROI or ROAS. I try to avoid conversations regarding revolving around the ROI. Like, for example, I predict we'll do 500% ROAS for next month
That's
because there's
really
too
hard
many
in lead
factors.
gen. Yeah, it's really
Yeah.
hard in lead gen. It's easier in shopping or ecom, but that's not our area of focus.
Yeah. Instead, I try to focus on just like the underlying factors that can drive performance. So while I cannot guarantee 500% ROAS next month, what I can do is say, hey, these are the underlying factors affecting performance right now. Like, part of the reason we're doing really well, sir, is our max conversion strategy is doing really well. So if we can hold on to that and there's not a lot of volatility, we'll be fine. Conversely, here's why I'm uncertain about the next 2 months. And now I'll start to explain why. Maybe we're heading into a slow time, right?
Yeah.
Or maybe they have to cut back on certain things. So I
Yeah.
try to explain like the factors involved with each month's performance rather than trying to focus on just, ROI.
Yeah, a part of setting ourselves up for success too is just, yeah, looking forward, looking ahead. Hey, Q4 is about to start. I just want to give you a heads up. B2B tends to be a lot slower in Q4, but here are the things that we're working on in order to squeeze as much as we can out of this time period. So getting ahead of it just so that you don't, shoot yourself in the foot. And also that lets the client know too that you're very aware of what could be happening and they appreciate it. So hopefully they won't, come back complaining in Q4 that, things slow down because you already warned them that this is what you were expecting to happen.
Yeah, it's fair.
All right. Well, that's pretty much it. Did you have any final questions or thoughts?
No, I think that was it for my
Okay.
end.
Okay. Well, thank you guys so much and we'll see you in the next one.